Hi, my name is Hugh McKillop, and for this Indigenous Studies English project, I decided to choose a documentary called Angry Inuk, which is showing on Amazon Prime Video, and it's produced and written by Alithe Arnake Burrell. In the documentary Angry Inuk, the producer, Alithe Arnake Burrell, informs the viewer that seal hunting is a traditional Inuit practice, unlike what the anti-sealing campaign shows. Throughout this documentary, Alithe Arnake Burrell wants to restore dignity to the Inuit seal hunters and Inuit peoples by showing the flaws in the common perception of seal hunting. In this clip, they travel to Europe and try and sway some of the EU parliamentarians as to not vote against the seal trade in Europe, although they do not succeed, which devastates all Inuit communities. This documentary is an artistic masterpiece, and it captures the sheer beauty of the North with breathtaking shots and panoramic views, as well as clips of hunting in the wild, as well as sledding and snowmobiling across the North. And here's my video clip from Angry Inuk.
We're just days away from the EU vote. Ayu and a few volunteers are heading to Europe to stand up for a fellow Inuit. Natsir is a fellow seamstress. Mika is a hunter and dog team owner, and Joshua is the head of the Iqaluit Hunters Association. Upon their arrival, we're surprised to see giant anti-sealing campaigns there already. The International Fund for Animal Welfare have a humongous inflatable seal balloon, and the Humane Society International set up a jumbo TV with anti-sealing ads.
You're not in favor of a ban on seals. But in the legislation that we will vote at noon, there is an exception for Inuit people, so they can go on for their personal use with killing seals, and that is the only exception to preserve the people of the Inuit.
For me, the exception is of no use because once the commercial hunt goes down, once the price goes down, he won't be able to make any money off the seals on which he depends, on which he and his wife depends. So whether the exception is there or not, we are being affected without our will.
I will think about it.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.
Why is this guy still talking about personal use? Ayu is telling him that she sells sealskin clothes for a living. The EU parliamentarians seem to be having a really hard time understanding that we're part of the commercial market. They're still picturing little Eskimos in igloos with no need for money. Ayu and the hunters are handing out pamphlets, and standing right beside them are anti-sealing campaigners handing out little white baby seal dolls.
I'll go to my granddaughter in America.
It's been illegal to hunt whitecoats in Canada for 30 years now. But they keep using images of them, deliberately misleading the public. We now know they've been here for months, giving out thousands of these white dolls. These are huge organizations with so much money to spread misinformation. And here we are with no resources to fight it. As we wait for the parliamentarians to vote, we can see how few of them we've been able to reach. It's us versus the little white seal dolls, and we see a lot of dolls in the room. Since no one thought to ask Inuit to be part of the discussion, we didn't stand a chance of stopping this ban from happening.
Piduartumitaikkua isumaaruvutigijakka asivartituinnallariin eqqanaajaaqangittun tamatuminga ajursalikannarniarmata pideqittuallarikkuuruaksugut tiarluti uvattini pitutiinasulluti saqqittoqiyaanga uvattinnapluuni imanailulaarpusiilan unitiseqqani pititausimangitlaat
Naronaronnetto. Naroartausemaqattaqutaikkua pidereaqartaamani ippigusungimma.
Now how to, yeah, now really how to prove our way.
When animal groups pretend we don't exist, or that we're frozen in time and untouched by the modern economy, this is what happens. I feel for Joshua. As the leader of his Hunters Association, it's plain to see he feels the weight of responsibility.
Ipinnallariqauyo tamanna aglaan qungattariassa ajornarsequilauqaqauyo ipinniaruarnikut tinnun ummativu isimuvu tamammittiattataartortuyaariqauman.
The main issue in the documentary was a very large movement known as the anti-sealing campaign. It took place over the past 50 years and was funded by very big organizations and big names such as Paul McCartney, who was very outspoken as anti-seal hunting. It was a global campaign arguing that seal hunting was wrong and should be stopped. The campaigners were well informed on the topic and were just following the big names and the images of cute white northern harp seals. Although this film has exposed the false pretenses of seal hunting, the damage to Inuit peoples and communities had already been done, and they lost a lot of their economy and income to the anti-sealing campaign, because selling furs and pelts was a common employment for many Inuit people. The world does not understand the importance of seal hunting to Inuit peoples. Seal hunting is a vital means for Inuit peoples to sustain themselves, and without it they would not be able to survive. After the ban in 2009, which was in the clip that we watched, the EU said they weren't targeting the Inuit peoples, yet after the ban, sales have dropped from 30,000 pelts a year to fewer than 1,000 pelts a year. The main issue, to sum it up, is that Inuit people have a deep tradition of seal hunting for food and for commerce, and the anti-sealing campaign didn't understand this because they were blinded by the images put out of people clubbing seals and dragging them off. Organizations such as Greenpeace poisoned the world with false information to fuel the anger in the anti-sealing campaign. For the article portion of this presentation, I chose an article from CTV News on the situation happening currently in Nova Scotia with the Micmac fishermen, because it's currently a very important movement in Canada and has taken over Canadian news. Right now, in Nova Scotia, there's a major dispute between the Micmac fishermen, who are called Sipeknekatik, and the Canadian government, as well as between the non-Indigenous fishermen. The dispute is over a 260-year-old treaty, known as the Peace and Friendship Treaty. In this treaty, it's specified that Nova Scotia Micmac fishermen have the right to earn a moderate livelihood, and the problem there is that a moderate livelihood is a very blurry line, and the description is not exact whatsoever. CTV News says the ruling also specified that the Micmac don't have the right to open-ended accumulation of wealth, but instead were limited to trading for necessities, a term directly lifted from a 260-year-old treaty. The Micmac fishermen would go on to open their own fishery in St. Mary's Bay in September during the off-season. This was highly disputed, but was a move that was defined by the Supreme Court ruling to be within its constitutional rights, but also a move that has hundreds of non-Indigenous commercial fishermen up in arms. Sipinekatik chief Mike Sack said if federal government won't negotiate with the Micmac to help to find moderate livelihood, then the Micmac people will do it themselves. This correlates with the issue brought up in the documentary Angry Inuk of the injustices to Inuit lives that the government has affected. In the documentary, it was to do with the adversity towards Inuit peoples on a topic that anti-sealing campaigns didn't understand, and that the big organizations such as Greenpeace were pushing false information on the public to join in their battle against the innocent Inuit seal hunters. Now, currently, the confusing treaty made 260 years ago has caused injustice for the Micmac people by preventing them from creating a superior livelihood. They can influence the people of Canada to an extreme extent to vote their way or to agree with them. The government, in the documentary, have affected the Inuit people against the world of anti-sealing campaigners who don't know the whole story. The Inuit people's opinion isn't understood. And the Micmac fishermen, Sipinekatik, are against the non-Indigenous fishermen, causing them pain and difficulty. This documentary and article are a very important part of Canadian history, and it's really insanely cool to think that currently we are making history, and all these good and bad events that are happening presently are going to be taught later on in the future. And maybe even our kids or our grandkids will learn about these events and ask us for advice. We are currently in history, and that is a cool thought. The reality is, though, that it is harder to be an Indigenous person currently because of the history of residential schools, as well as currently being ignored in the media and on voting, as well as their opinion is not always taken into account on important decisions deciding their lives and their livelihood, as shown in this documentary and article. Thank you for listening to my presentation. This project has really been a great project for me because I did not know much about Indigenous culture or the past with them, and it's really informed me about the adversity Indigenous peoples face every day, and it's given me more time to reflect on how lucky I am to be Canadian and in a country where we hopefully are able to sort out these problems peacefully and without much time passing between now and when they are sorted out. Thank you for listening.